repetitive.
Repetitive,
It's also extraordinarily odd watching two people I've never met have sex on my iPhone.
Yeah.
in the dark.
Hairy, stinky man with floppy bits. Political compass test, take 2. My fault. Okay, so if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations.
I think I'd agree with that.
Agree?
Yeah, agree.
Okay. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong.
No, I strongly disagree with that.
Strongly disagree.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I'm having to do this twice. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it.
Oh, I disagree with that. I think at times when life's hard and people are feeling disillusioned and they don't necessarily have something to anchor themselves to, it may not be the country itself in terms of a landmass, but if there's a big sporting event going on, it's quite. I mean, obviously, what happened at the final of the Euros was really sad because it was people using kind of national pride as an excuse to behave appallingly. But in general, I think it can galvanise people and give people a sense of common purpose.
Definitely.
And bring together different disparate sections of whatever the population that wouldn't normally have a kind of a sense of unity.
It's quite rare in the UK to see England flags flying, isn't it? You see quite a few Scottish flags, the odd Welsh flag, and obviously you see the Union flag, but you rarely see, unless it's football, the St George's flag.
I'm guilty of that. When I see the St George's flag, my immediate connotation is one of kind of like far-right nationalism, where I don't know why that is, because it can just be the fact that people are proud of England.
Yeah.
I don't know why I attach that stigma to it.
I think I think a lot of us are guilty of that and have been guilty at some point in our lives, and I think the reason for that is, I hate to say it, but I just think it's media brainwashing. And I am a victim of that 100% because I used to be like that.
So am I, clearly, because there's no reason for me to think that. It could just be genuine pride and
like in the States, everybody a lot of people fly Old Glory in the States, and not many people would drive past and be like, must be a racist. But yeah, and the other thing I was saying was, we recorded this a second ago and I messed up, my bad. This point that I often talk to people about is, what I would say a good way of thinking of this is about whether or not you would be proud of your parents, because you didn't choose your parents, but a lot of people are very proud of their parents. You could say that's, you sort of judge your parents by their actions, and that's what makes you proud. But I also think there's just a natural kind of a natural bond that makes you prouder than you would be of somebody else's parents doing the same thing. So like if your parents pay off their mortgage, you'd be like, oh, I'm so proud of you. If somebody else's parents pay off their mortgage, you'd be proud of them, but not as much as your parents, because there's a bond there, and it's the same with countries.
And we're quite tribal, aren't we, as a species, and we sort of naturally try and gravitate towards a small group of people.
Yeah.
So it's obviously on a much larger scale, but if it gives people a sense of connection, then that's a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. And speaking of which...
But not so much the country itself, like I wouldn't say...
Like areas and
groups. But what the national teams are representing is a sense of sort of togetherness rather than the fact that they're British. I think this is French.
Yeah. But I think this is obviously just in general about being proud of your country.
Yeah.
Okay, so our race, speaking of which, our race has many superior qualities compared with other races.
No, I strongly disagree with that.
Strongly disagree? Come on, mouse.
As soon as I hear things like race and superior qualities, I immediately start thinking of far-right Germany and that, where that ended up, so probably agree with that.
Yeah. And, we're seeing the same thing in China at the moment. Obviously, the Han Chinese they take priority in China. If you're not Han, you're nothing in China.
Well, in India, they have the caste system, don't they, as well?
They do.
So it doesn't matter what caste you're born into. If you're incredibly intelligent, very, very capable, if you're born in a certain caste, you can't rise
move
above
up
a certain level.
Yeah.
It's a lot of discrimination.
Man, the things we take for granted in the West is crazy, because Riv was talking to me about the caste system, and he couldn't comprehend that. He couldn't understand. But if you're super intelligent and you're gonna you're gonna cure cancer, you still can't move up.
No, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Although I'm sure they try and make an exemption for that, but Anyway, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
No, because I don't really have enemy's a very strong word, but if I really disliked someone, there could be someone who's equally unpleasant in my mind that they didn't get on with. So I think that's a very superficial. So I'd strongly disagree with that as well.
Yeah, it needs more info, doesn't it?
You've gone to disagree. I'd go strongly disagree on that one.
Strongly disagree and strongly disagree. Military action that defies international law, Tony Blair, is sometimes justified.
I feel that morally and emotionally, I want to say I strongly disagree. However, to try and pick a kind of thought experiment or a random scenario, which is obviously a little bit dramatic based on the TV series 24 or something, if you had someone who's
they know where a bomb is.
You could keep arguing. Someone's got access to information about a bomb that's going to go off in 15 minutes, and it would contravene international law to behave in a certain way. I'm not saying that I would justify torture, but if there were certain protocols that people could put into place that would get the answer and obeying international law wouldn't, then get the waterboard out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I'd say I agree.
Yeah.
Rarely, but I agree.
Yeah. I'm with you, I think. I just think you have to think of all scenarios, and these questions seem... Anyway. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. And like I was saying before, I think that they probably originally meant something like Fox News, but I actually now think you could apply that way more to something like MSNBC, where we saw a news anchor crying when the result of the Russia probe came back to show nothing on Donald Trump. She cried on TV. So there is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment.
Well, it used to be, there was a podcast with Joe Rogan and Matt Taibbi, who's a freelance journalist.
It used to be Rolling Stone.
Yeah, and they were talking about the distinct lack of impartial news sources.
Yeah.
And it feels very much now as if different information sources are either politically or emotionally or ideologically motivated, so they're not necessarily just giving you a dispassionate list of events, they're kind of giving you their view on it. I think it was Emily Mattis that started making lots of comments about, and it's perfectly okay for anyone to have those opinions, because she's allowed to, anyone's allowed to if they're a person, but if you're being paid to present the news, it's not about what you think about the news, it's what's happening, and just reporting on events rather than giving your stance, because otherwise you have a conversation with someone secondhand.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want your opinion of what's happened, I just want to know what's happened.
And the petrol crisis, it became very clear that the petrol crisis wasn't a crisis until the media got hold of it, and then they generated a crisis.
Absolutely.
So I would say that there is a worrying fusion. I would say I agree.
Okay.
That one.
Okay, so I'll agree with that. Next page. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality.
I think that's something that's probably fluctuated over different generations, depending on the amount of immigration, the sort of prevailing political party. I think at times of relative austerity in the past, people were probably going to identify more strongly by class. I feel that recently with what's happened, there tends to have been more post-Rotherham and things about immigration. I would say now, I think probably not by much, but I would say people are ultimately divided more by class. I would say I disagree with that.
Okay. Again, it's
people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality.
Yeah. So you think there's a slight closer bond of nationality now?
No, sorry, I would agree. Sorry, I would agree, not disagree. So I think people identify more strongly with... No, hang on, sorry, I'm not reading that properly.
It's because he's going to term divided.
People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. No, I disagree. I think people are divided more by nationality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Disagree on there as well. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment.
As we said before, it's a good point. It's a bit like a chicken and egg thing. My feeling is that if inflation got seriously out of hand, unemployment would not be irrelevant, but it would become a secondary problem. So I would say that controlling inflation is more important. So I would say I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree as well.
They're both problems, so I couldn't so strongly agree. But
that's the problem with some of these questions. Is either side in its extreme can be a problem, and obviously here, as we said before, if you had 5,000 or 6,000 in your bank, and then suddenly that in a year's time that money's halved in value, that's also a massive problem. So depending on the timeline, they can both be big problems. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation.
I would say I strongly agree with that.
Okay.
You can't discriminate and say every single corporation is selfish and venal and driven by its own needs, but the vast majority of them, whether they're limited companies or PLCs or whatever, they're going to be primarily geared towards making as much profit as possible. So I would say, as much as they may want to do that, if it was going to interfere with the amount of money they were paying their board or their shareholders or whatever, then they probably need to be regulated.
It's not just down to the CEO and what he wants to do or whatever, is it? There's so many people now in big companies, big corporations, that you can be pressured into doing things. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Very communist idea there. So a doctor's going to doctor, a mechanic's going to mechanic, an intelligent person is going to intelligent, and a stupid person is going to stupid.
From each according to his ability to each according to his need.
So if you're a millionaire, but you don't need £1 million, and then there's another guy who's like, dude, I'm in £1 million worth of debt from gambling. That's a very extreme example. In theory, they're saying that you should help him. And then if you need help in the future, somebody else will come along and help you.
Well, it depends if it's a part of an entrenched legal code, or whether it comes down to being more of a kind of moral convention amongst the population.
Yeah.
I would say that I disagree with that, because you can't always count on people reciprocating.
Exactly.
So that would be my reservation. But as a premise, no, I disagree with it. Not strongly, but I do disagree with that. Well, if that's what you're saying.
That's basically what they mean. I'm obviously putting it into in a bit of hyperbole. But the thing I find wrong with this idea is that if we can't trust the sort of, this would be, I guess, the sort of beta solution to the alpha solution, which would be
kill what you eat what you kill.
Yeah, you look after yourself. If we can't trust the alpha solution for people to take their own responsibility, how the F is this going to work? So you're now asking for people to take responsibility for others.
Social contracts are wonderful in principle, but when it comes to the actual application of them in real life terms, I think it becomes harder to...
Absolutely. The freer the market, the freer the people.
I mean, Thatcher was famed for her. She basically just got rid of all financial regulation, didn't she? She got rid of all the red tape and basically said, listen, go forth and prosper.
Ronald Reagan.
Let's take all the regulation out and just give the market the opportunity to boom. Again, I mean, there's always going to be implications in the long term, because my limited understanding of the economy will always go through stages of boom and bust. It has done since time immemorial. It's always been the case that there's been recessions and then booms and then recessions and booms.
Yep.
So when it was happening, I would agree with that, but I think there would be adverse implications further down the line. But if you're asking me to say with that, I'd probably agree with it.
Good man.
For the time that the market was initially freed up.
Yes. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as... I really hate this question. As something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. The reason that question frustrates me is because I've heard a lot of, and this is slightly different because they're talking about bottled water, but I've heard a lot of people saying things like, the fact that we even have to pay for the water that comes out of our taps is absurd. And I'm thinking, why? Do you know how expensive it is to get processed water down the pipes into people's houses safely? It's massively expensive.
Isn't UK tap water full of cocaine and estrogen because of the pill, and apparently that's true?
Probably.
It's a sad reflection. So no, I strongly disagree with that.
Okay.
The reason being that I did a course about quite a long time ago now and he said that if you try to provide UK or US tap water in Denmark, you'd be put in prison because their levels of regulation for tap water for the general population are so much higher than ours. So, sad reflection on society that something as basic as drinking water is not. Well, no, I don't know. If people want to spend their money on, I mean, you can argue it's ridiculous that people want to drink Evian, but then if you go by that logic, you could say it's a sad reflection on our society that someone wants to buy a BMW when they could drive a Fiat or a Lada.
Absolutely,
so, I strongly disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue that's just the arbitrary irrationality of people, but I don't think it's a sad reflection on our society.
No, I mean, like people have the choice whether to buy it or not, and I just think that a lot of people don't understand how hard it is to process water that's safe. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Tough one, isn't it? I think.
Land shouldn't be a commodity. I mean, perhaps not in a state of nature, but we're not all living in tribes without technology. And do you know what I mean? If we were all still hunter-gatherers, then I'd agree with that. But unfortunately, we are in a state of advanced technological consumer society. So I disagree with that. I mean, I can't strongly disagree with it, but land shouldn't be a commodity. Well, no, I mean, in an idealistic sense, in a philosophical sense, perhaps not, but that's a bit of a moot point because we're dealing with the life that we have now.
We are where we are.
So, I disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, with that one, I get it. Like, I've said it myself as a teenager, and a lot of people say it. We're the only species on the planet that has to pay for where we live. But like you said,
we're also the only one that wears trousers. So it's, do you know what I mean?
We are where we are.
Yeah.
And it's all very well saying, like, let's just all be free and when we die, someone else can move in on our patch. But we haven't lived like that for thousands of years. No. And trying to implement that now would be trying to implement gun restrictions on America. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Wow.
It's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to. Well,
so they're talking about traders.
I partly agree. Oh right, okay. I mean, I was going to say certain people like Elon Musk and.
No, because they say he's contributing to the space.
Yeah, it's regrettable that many. Well, it's not many, but anyway, it's a tiny fraction of society.
Yeah.
Personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I mean, I don't know enough about the economic implications of how much. I know there was a big argument that the Labour Party effectively provided the FSA, which was this kind of toothless regulatory body that did absolutely nothing to stop the traders from perpetuating the financial crash. And a lot of people said, if you leave the economy in the hands of the most manipulative, calculating, greedy people, what do you expect them to do?
Absolutely.
So again, that comes down to the fact the government didn't adequately legislate and restrict. There wasn't there weren't those kind of inhibitory mechanisms to stop them behaving.
Yeah.
Like all the credit default swaps, all the toxic trades that none of the quants understood.
Yeah.
There are all these deals going down, and it's like, right, what's our risk? And people are like, I don't even understand what the equations are.
I don't know what's going on here.
I mean, loads of things are regrettable. That may. I mean,
Trouble is, though.
I don't know. I mean, it's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply. Yeah, I'd probably agree, but it's not many. But I would agree with that. I think it
Don't
is.
You think
sad.
That's a loaded question, though?
Yeah, I feel like they're telling me, like the use of the word regrettable.
They're saying that they simply manipulate money, as if we could all manipulate money and make hundreds of millions.
And how much money are they paying in tax? How much are they putting back into the economy?
Paying people to work on their mansions.
If they're all kind of non-doms and they're evasive with their payments, but if they're paying a huge amount of their salary back,
it's a loaded question.
It's regrettable. I'd probably disagree, actually.
Yeah, fuck that. Massive loaded question. Jesus. Okay, protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. So, like, so if you're trying to trade timber from Canada to, say, whiskey from the UK, but you're trading a lot more timber, then the UK might want to put something in to protect the whiskey trade, because you're trading different amounts. So you're sort of protecting your own trade.
Probably agree with that. Unfortunately.
Well, some things are just necessary, aren't they?
It's not ideal if everyone else is doing it. Then...
The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to the shareholders.
I disagree.
Okay. The rich are too highly taxed.
No, that's an argument which I find completely irrational when people say, oh, it's all the bankers, it's all this, it's all that. And I think, well, what were you saying earlier? That the highest proportion of the...
Yeah, I think it's 85% of the tax that goes to the Treasury is from the top 10%.
Yeah, so I disagree with that.
A lot of people hate to hear that because it goes against everything they've been brought up to think by school and media.
What you think and what are true are two different things. Just because people are perpetuating a certain myth doesn't mean it's...
They did something, and this is in America. The first quote I just said is from the UK. But they did something in America where they worked out that if they taxed the top 1% at 100%, that it would only raise the Treasury funds effectively by something like 17%.
Right, okay.
Which people are like, that's a huge amount. Yeah, but it's not the sort of amount that you would need to carry out some of the things that they want to do.
No, it's not fundamental.
No. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you put yourself on the other side of that, if you're the best surgeon in the land, and you're like, well, I'm willing to do it, but I want to get paid more because I'm way better than all the other surgeons here, why shouldn't he be allowed to do that?
I've trained a lot of people over the years in fairly affluent parts of the country, and there are people who are incredibly successful who have created their wealth from next to nothing.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot more common than people think.
And regardless of whether people believe me or not, it's true. And they're normally very humble and very modest, and they don't ever talk about how much money they earn, which is a lovely trait anyway. But if someone's worked incredibly hard, sacrificed an enormous amount of
taken
time,
a lot of risk,
and taken a lot of risk,
that's the biggest thing.
Then I completely, in fact, those with the ability to pay, I strongly agree with that, actually. Okay. I think good on them. Why shouldn't they?
No, I agree.
It doesn't mean that I want people who don't have money to not get medical care, but should they have the ability to go further, then I think they should. They should be able to buy that. They've earned the right to do that.
I think there's too much wealth shame in the world. And I know there'll be a load of 17-year-old fake communists out there laughing at me, going, oh, wealth shame. But it's true. Like, people in Western countries are made to feel guilty if they have a bit more money than someone else.
Yeah, sure.
And I just think that's wrong. And it's not like I'm wealthy. I'm saying this as someone that is not wealthy.
Neither am I, mate.
No, I know. But that's what I'm saying. Like, we're sitting here as people that are not wealthy. Average money at best.
At best.
Average money at best.
Yeah.
And you can sit here and say, people should at least get a choice what they want to spend their money on. Like, if you want, I said in the last video, if you want to send your kid to private school, why shouldn't you be allowed to do that? And you might not think it's a good idea, but if you do, you should be given the choice.
It's like that picture you put up of me at the end of the last podcast we did, when I did my competition shoot, that photo shoot.
Yeah.
People go, oh my God, I'd love to look like that. And it's like, well, if you want to sacrifice 10 weeks of feeling angry, sleep deprived, totally preoccupied with your food, your training, having no capacity for anything that isn't related to that one goal for that one day because it's not sustainable, then you can get that. And it's a bit like when people go, oh God, I wish I had an M3 competition. They're so lucky that guy. And it's like, that guy could have won the lottery. He could have had rich parents. Yeah. Neither of which he needs to apologise for, because that's a, what do they say, an immutable characteristic. You don't pick your parents.
Yeah.
But someone might have worked their arse off and sacrificed weekends and evenings and relationships and been stressed and been. And
I keep saying that, but man, I don't think people get what it's like. So if you've saved up 10 grand over 5 years, and someone says, look, I've got this pendant. And it's worth 30, 40 grand, but I just don't have the time to deal with it. I've already got enough money. Give me 10 grand and it's yours. The balls that it takes to go, I don't really know much about that. but I'm going to give you everything I've saved up because I might be able to make a bunch of money. That takes big cojones. People think it doesn't, but it does. It really does. So the risk to me is as big a one as the hard work put in.
Sure.
Like, 'cause if you're willing to just continuously take risk, it's a much different deal than just walking into something that the government's given you. Like,
I agree.
If the government takes somebody's factory that they spent 50 years creating, and then they're like, it's all yours now, guys. There's no risk there. So, anyway, so government should penalise businesses that mislead the public.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that.
Okay. And a genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predatory multinationals to create monopolies.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know how feasible it is. I agree because I don't know how ideologically plausible it is. The realistic implementation of that is, again, all these things are wonderful as a principle or a premise.
I agree.
Yes, but how feasible is it? So that's why I'm going with agree.
No, I'm with you. Okay. Excuse me. Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal.
I strongly disagree with that.
Abortion, when a woman's life is threatened.
Is not threatened.
Oh, sorry. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Yeah, I would probably say I disagree. I don't think I strongly disagree. I hate people that use abortion as a method of contraception. When I think about somebody ending a child's life, and let's be honest, it is. Like, if you're going to have a child...
Doesn't it depend at what stage of... As in,
I get it, but...
at one point it's a collection of cells.
Yeah, but it's going to grow into a child.
Yes.
So for me personally, and I actually have quite a lot of sympathy for most people's opinion on this, except for possibly the ones that are at the very extremes, I have quite a lot of sympathy for. But me personally, I just think, like, that kid could have grown up. You know, you've seen his first smile. You could have seen him get married. You could have seen him play on the rugby team. You know, he could have been a doctor that ends cancer. I know it's not very likely, but it could be a life.
But also, what sort of life would that hypothetical child have if the parent just didn't want them?
Yeah, bad, but the parent could give them up for adoption. They could be fostered. Like, I just feel like you've got to give them a chance. I feel like nowadays, I'm not talking about never, but I just think that nowadays people use it as like, oh, I forgot to use condom and I forgot to take the pill.
You think that happens?
Absolutely it happens.
Right, I'm very naive about that.
Dude, it happens to the max. Like, young women now, as much as I think it massively affects them when they do it, I do think that they look at it like, wow, if worst comes to worst, I'll just get an abortion.
Right, okay. I mean, I'll stick with my initial answer.
No, that's fine.
That was my gut reaction.
Yeah. No, that's good. All authority should be questioned.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm terrible for that. I mean, I've got a real issue. Someone said to me once, your biggest problem is that you will sort of, like, if someone in a uniform with a badge came up and said, right, do the funky chicken, I'm dancing, and I have a sort of a real, I don't know, like a sort of a completely irrational fear of authority figures. I wouldn't question it. So yeah, I think that is right. I think all authority, within reason. I mean, if you've done something wrong, I think when people just arbitrarily denigrate the police and say they're all awful because someone's cherry-picked 4 or 5 admittedly terrible instances. Like there was a thing on the BBC recently with Stephen Merchant about Stephen Port, the chap who murdered 4 men in Barking about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously the police officers that were involved in that case, if the representation is true and there's no reason to suspect that it
isn't,
but you'd hope it wasn't, if that's an accurate portrayal of the way that they behaved based on the fact that the 4 people that died were gay men, then yes, those officers completely failed the families that they were supposed to be representing, and they didn't do their job properly. But is it fair to say that they are an accurate representation of every single police officer? Of course not.
No, yeah, I mean, I just think there's certain professions just come under a lot more scrutiny than others, don't they? Imagine if we put the same sort of scrutiny on truck drivers or taxi drivers as we do on police. people would never take a taxi again.
Wasn't there a thing yesterday in the press about a Romanian lorry driver, who mowed down loads of people? It was like a fireball because he was looking at porn on his phone.
Oh my god!
And he just drove a truck straight into people and killed, like, I don't know how many people he killed.
In the UK?
In the UK, yeah, it was in the paper yesterday. But again, is he an accurate representation of every person that's ever driven a lorry? Well,
no,
of course
absolutely not. No. Yeah. Okay, let me just check that I have that. All authority should be questioned. Yep. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Biblical reference there for you.
It's one of my biggest. I don't want to stray into dangerous territory because I'm. How do you describe me? Classical liberal.
Yeah.
I try and be quite open-minded.
Not like a lefty, but just a liberal-minded centrist person.
Well, I think people should be allowed to do what they want to do. I think it's John Stuart Mill thing. You should be allowed to do what you want to do as long as you're not hurting anyone else.
Classical liberal.
And whoever someone wants to sleep with, or whatever they want to identify with, or whatever they want to do in terms of the way they see it as a legitimate way of spending their life, let them get on with it. If they're not hurting you, it doesn't matter whether you don't approve. You know, I can understand there's religious things that might kind of cloud someone's judgment or affect their views. And again, if you don't want to make a cake for someone because you feel that same-sex relationships are wrong, you shouldn't have to make the cake for them. And what is it? I think you said this in your most recent podcast, or the guy Will that you were talking to said that George Orwell said that true liberty is the right to say something to somebody that they don't want to hear.
That's right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest problems, to start the biggest preamble ever to make my point, which is one of the issues I have with people that seem to be, and I don't know if I'm using the term woke correctly in this, but a very strong left, is that I understand that you don't want people to be discriminated against, oppressed, bullied, marginalised for who they are or what they represent. And yet a lot of the rhetoric that I hear from them is very, very much that if you're white, middle class and you have a penis, that you should be shot.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of like a very Old Testament. If you're saying there's a huge amount of financial and political inequality, and that we need to make sure that different people have the right to be represented in Parliament and have certain roles and get good access to education, I'm all for that in a practical, realistic way. But it seems to be, not only do we want that, we also want people that have been marginalised and oppressed to have more power to now scrutinise and shame and humiliate the people that they see as being the oppressor. And to me, that's just creating a new imbalance by changing 100%. The parameters around.
Yeah.
So it's a very long-winded way of saying an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. I disagree with it, because then where does it stop?
It doesn't.
That's where tribal warfare comes from, because you're constantly saying, oh yeah, well, they killed 2 of my people and I've only killed 1 of theirs, so I need to kill 1 more person and then we're even.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And it just repeats and repeats.
I agree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis.
I strongly disagree. I read a really interesting book called Consolations of Philosophy by Alain de Botton, and he was saying that one of his biggest, I think he talks about Socrates, and he said Socrates died because he was prepared to stand up for what he knew to be right over what would be publicly popular, and he wasn't prepared to sacrifice his views. And I think there is some truth in the fact that the prevailing wisdom may have been arrived upon by years and years of collective misunderstanding, and there are certain things that people accept as being true and normal that seem bizarre to me. So no, I don't believe that just because a lot of people aren't going to a certain theatre or museum, it doesn't mean that what's on show is incredibly valuable.
100%. I'm completely down with that.
And that's not to try and sound like an intellectual snob. I'm not a genius, but I think there are certain nuances to things that just because the average person, and I'm not again to sound like a complete arsehole, the average person whose obsession is putting their new leased car that they can't afford in their weird white horse teeth veneers, and they're obsessed with Love Island on Instagram because they don't want to go and see some obscure artist and there's more of them than the people. That does that mean that the artist shouldn't, and we should all have like a Love Island memorabilia thing in Trafalgar Square?
I definitely
think...
There's
me being really, really discriminatory against people that love Love Island, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I think massively the good example for that is just a museum. Like, we have a lot of historical artifacts in a museum. Yeah. You and I might be too busy with kids or work or whatever to go there now, but we probably in the back of our mind think, if ever I wanted to go and see that 18th century statue and all the other stuff that's in there, we can do that. And also, I don't want all those statues to end up in places we're never going to see them again.
No, quite right.
We're living in a world where China is predicted in 12 years to be 3 times richer than America at its peak.
Right.
And twice as powerful politically. Mm-hmm. When that happens, people will very quickly start selling, my old nan's ivory picture frame from 17th century Persia, because the value of the Chinese, yuan and the renminbi will be so high that you won't be able to not, when someone's like, here's 4 million for your nan's old, ivory picture. So I think it's good that we subsidise a few museums.
Yeah, agreed.
Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Disagree. Okay.
Do I strongly disagree? Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory.
I think you have to have a bit of boundary in there, because a bit of give
depending
in there.
on what the schools are teaching, I would say I disagree, but there's always going to be exceptions.
Because I think that, for me personally, I think if your country starts to go insane, you should be allowed to pull your child out and say, I'm going to handle
I agree.
My child's education.
As in, I agree, so I would say I disagree rather than strongly disagree with that one.
Okay. All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind.
Strongly disagree.
I agree in one example there.
Hang on.
And that would be...
well, in prison, if you've got a man who identifies... If a man is arrested and says, I'm probably going to get... I don't know what your audience is like, but
they're cool.
Whoever's watching this, if everyone thinks I'm some sort of awful zealot, I really apologise, because I try not to be. If a man committed 15 rapes and was convicted and then said, I identify as a woman, and they then put a man who, until 30 seconds ago, had raped women into a female prison because he identified as a woman, that to me would seem like a manipulation of that. So I would say I disagree. Okay. That would be the exception, if I'm not misreading that question.
No, I don't think you're misreading it. I don't think they probably expected people to have that deep of an answer, but I think you're right as well. I think there are definitely times where certain people should keep to their own kind, but I think they're obviously meaning do you think that Romanians should keep to Romanians?
Right.
But anyway, it's not like you've answered strongly agree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Okay.
I have got first-hand experience of that, so I'm going to say I strongly disagree.
So do I. So I'm going to say... Oh no, this is yours. Okay. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's natural and healthy, obviously depending on what the secret is, but yeah, everyone should have a degree of privacy. No one should be compelled to be an open book at all times to all people.
It also depends what the child's age is, doesn't it? That's the thing with these questions. If you've got a 7-year-old that's is it natural for them to keep from you the fact that a guy named Billy sitting, peering over a fence every weekend, you wouldn't want them to keep that from you.
No.
But if it's I've been sneaking up a couple of sweets every fortnight. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offence.
Obviously, I've got a pretty interesting track record with drugs. So, I would say that possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offence.
Can I put one thing in your head for this?
Yeah.
Don't think about any history. Just think in terms of should some people be allowed to buy it without being a criminal?
Yeah, that's what I was going to go for. Probably. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Not for everyone. For some people, I don't think it's. CBD might be medicinal. I'm not sure THC is medicinal, but the reality is, like alcohol, not everyone that smokes weed is going to end up having the problems that I had with it. So it's it shouldn't cloud my judgment of everyone.
That's the trouble. When you're making something illegal, you're saying that nobody can ever buy it legally. Okay, so the prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs.
The prime
function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs.
I strongly disagree with that. I think that's one of the biggest problems. What is it they say? Formal education in the UK is like expecting a fish to learn how to climb a tree. And the thing is, you've got different people with different strengths, different attributes, different skills. and the fact that everyone is now encouraged to go to university as if there's some stigma to being...
It's so stupid.
There's nothing wrong. I'm someone who's academically reasonably bright. I was very good at English, I was very good at history, but I was appallingly bad at maths and science. I'm just not good at...
I don't remember that. I remember you being really good at geography as well.
I don't know. I mean, I know at school I was in set 4 because it was all based on sciences, and then I was put in set 1 for English with all the scholarship kids who looked at me like I was a large piece of excrement with shoes on when I walked in, because they were just like,
because you played rugby.
What's he doing here? But I think you should try and encourage the fact that different people have abilities like being incredibly empathetic or kind or funny or intuitive, and different people are going to have... There's such a broad array of things. It's not all about can you go on to be a chartered accountant. And I'm not anti-chartered accountants. Great if you want to do that, but there's loads of people that don't want to be a chartered accountant. They want to be a comedian or I don't know, an artist or a stripper. Yeah, and I don't know how many people grow up thinking I want to be a stripper, but whatever. If you're out there, good on you.
Yeah, make some money.
Yeah, exactly. Right, next one.
People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. You'd be amazed at some of the people that have answered that in a certain way.
I disagree. Grudgingly, because I can see the point that it's not fair to pass something on to someone who doesn't have an option.
Oh, hold on. You said disagree.
People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. So I think they should be.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, the way you were saying.
It's like a double negative, isn't it?
Yeah.
People with serious disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce.
No, they should be. Yeah. It also depends on the disabilities. Like, if your disability is that you're a psychopath, whereas if your disability is just that you are a functioning person that happens to have Down syndrome or light Down syndrome, then why shouldn't you be allowed to have a kid?
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. The most important thing for children to learn is discipline.
The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. No, I disagree with that. I don't strongly disagree because I think it's important, but I don't think it's the most important thing. It's one of many things that people need to learn.
Yeah. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures.
Completely agree. Strongly agree. There are no savage and civilised people. Well,
there are just different cultures.
That depends if you're looking at people within a certain, like for example,
ISIS. Just different.
But when you look at things like the Serbo-Croat War, that was driven by people using nationalism as an excuse for barbarism.
But is it just different cultures, or are there some uncivilized people?
The problem is there are people that will manipulate a cultural difference, and they will mobilise people, like you said earlier, and they will just gradually keep changing the goalposts. Before a while, people will be thinking, hang on a minute, a while ago we just had differences of opinions, we were ideologically a little bit different, but we could kind of acknowledge other people's views and the relevance and the validity of their perspective. And now we're burning people or decapitating people.
Crucifying them, weren't they?
There are no strange or civilised people. There are only different cultures. But again, it's not the culture that's the problem. It's the individuals within the culture who are manipulating.
But don't you think there are some... I'll put my opinion out.
Yeah.
I think that there literally are such things as uncivilised people. And that's no offence to those people. But the people on Sentinel Island that eat people... They just haven't yet been civilised.
Well, they keep throwing spears at them. They killed everyone, didn't they?
Yeah, like everybody that gets close, they murder and then they cook them. And I'm not saying, you have to be honest at some point and be like, yes, I'm not going to invite those people around for Sunday lunch. ISIS, as a culture, in my opinion, were uncivilised.
Yeah, I would disagree with that then.
So that's just my opinion.
I agree with you. This is the problem. There's these questions that I know they're saying you should try and probably answer them a bit more intuitively than we are. But anyway, carry on.
But I know what you're trying to say. I also think that they ask you these questions in a way that it sounds like they've already cast their opinion of you if you answer it in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly.
So you find yourself going, I mean, no offence, but
I don't want to come across as being an awful person.
But I think we just have to be honest at some points. And I'm honestly going to say that ISIS are uncivilised. Sorry. Don't string up people for their own views. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support.
I agree.
Those who are able to work and refuse should not. Yeah, I agree. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with cheerful things. I disagree, but this is you.
When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep... it depends. It's a stupid question.
It is, yeah.
It's a ridiculous question.
It's basically saying if you have depression, should you just be cheerful?
If you're used to it and you know it's just a period and you want to get through it, like for example, I feel incredibly depressed at the moment. You know, I suffer with chronic,
clinical depression.
Not chronic, but it's intermittent.
Yeah.
But it is chronic in the sense that it's gone on for a long period of time, but it isn't consistent throughout. I have ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And I feel incredibly depressed at the moment. But seeing you is always wonderful. I know that it'll pass, but it's horrendous. It's no easier for me to tolerate or bear, but I'm so much more familiar with the pattern that I know eventually it will dissipate and I'll go back to feeling, not necessarily, I'm not really a very cheerful person, but I'll go back to feeling happier. So I think for me I would agree with that at the moment. I think that's a very
better not to think about it
at the moment for me,
okay.
Because I'm used to it. But for someone who's experiencing it for the first time, they could potentially kill themselves because they feel so lonely and confused.
Yeah.
So I would say I disagree with that.
You disagree.
Yeah.
Okay. Disagree.
But again, it's too nuanced a question. But I would say I disagree for the majority of people. If it was 100 people, I would say I disagree with that for the 100 people. Although there'd be people within that who it would apply to.
Yeah. Okay. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country.
I
Disagree. Yeah. I'd go down with that. Like, there's loads of people that are, there's a lot of people that before they even get to a country feel like they're part of that country.
Yeah.
I guess America's probably a good example of that. There's a lot of people around the world that would feel like they love everything America before they even get there. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. What?
I strongly disagree.
Yeah.
Discuss that. Why don't think doing?
No, it's just a tormenting question. Or an whatever. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, I think I'd be on the fence. Like, I think you don't want a government. You don't really want like the Big Brother screen.
No.
Where they're telling you what to think and they're telling you their version of what's going on. But then at the same time, you look at some of the nature stuff that David, what's his name? Attenborough, yeah. What David Attenborough did. I mean, those things around the world, like people know that guy's voice all around the world, and those were government funded. So it's not always as straightforward as people like to think.
The issue I've got, mate, is I've got about 10 minutes left before I've got to go.
No worries.
Should we shoot through the last bit?
Yeah. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counter-terrorism.
Agree.
Okay, hold on. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress.
Strongly disagree.
In a democratic political system.
I don't think a one-party state is a good idea ever.
Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried.
Strongly disagree.
Me too. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes.
I agree.
Me too. Okay, let's just scroll that down. Okay. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded.
Disagree. Strongly disagree with that, actually.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I'm pro-communism, but I just think it's a statement that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's fair. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all.
That's all to do with conception, isn't it?
I think so. I must admit, I do think that art is a massive tax cut for most people. So there's a lot of people that do that.
Okay.
And sell it for like 5 million and that, because that helps people not pay taxes. Okay. And that's how you've got such weird art sometimes. But as you say, it's in the eye. of the beholder. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehab.
I strongly disagree.
It's a waste of time to try and rehabilitate some criminals.
Strongly disagree. Oh, it's a waste of time to strongly rehabilitate. Agree.
Agree.
I think there are probably some people that are beyond. Someone who's chronically reoffended, recidivism or whatever. They've got no
They're definitely
willingness.
Yeah. Excuse me. The business person and manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist.
Strongly disagree.
Okay. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. And I guess they mean mothers in that as well.
It's tricky because I don't understand why you would have a baby if you didn't at least want to have some. But again, that goes for the fathers as well. It's not just the mums. But if two people have a child that become parents, obviously, Iain, well done, pointing that one out. Fundamental reproduction point there. If they didn't want to have anything to do with their children, I would be a bit bemused as to why they'd had the child.
Agree.
So I would say I agree, but I would also say that applies to the man as well. Okay. So I'm not saying that because I think it's not a sexist thing. I think that obviously there's certain things that the mum can do that the dad can't, but I would think if neither of them or both of them, they should both be prepared to.
I feel like females are, by their nature, better at a kind of parenting a very young child.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason that they have breasts, and you know they're going to be able to breastfeed a lot better than the father is. So sometimes you just can't argue with nature. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries.
Multinational?
Gas, oil. Multinational companies are exploiting gas and oil from poor countries.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would probably put disagree, but I'd be close to the middle. The only reason I say that is that I think a lot of people say you're exploiting those countries, but a lot of countries are unable to extract that stuff.
Yeah, true.
And as we've just seen in Afghanistan, we chose not to exploit their lithium supply, and the second we left, within a week, China had just signed a 30-year deal for all lithium in Afghanistan. Anyway, making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. So kind of like making peace with the status quo. This is just how things are.
I agree. That's all right. No, I disagree.
Disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, disagree. Next page. Astrology accurately explains many things.
Disagree. I wish it did. I don't think it does.
Yeah, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? You cannot be moral.
I'm supposed to meet someone and get married and have a beautiful baby girl this year, and I've been told that about 4 times, and it's starting to kind of make me feel quite unhappy because it feels like someone's playing. If you're out there, hi, I'm willing and ready.
6 foot,
exactly
180 pounds.
And what, a woman?
No, you.
Oh right, fucking hell, I was going to say that'd be terrifying. Right, I think we can arm wrestle each other. Right, go for it.
I don't know, there's supermodels that are tall, right?
Yeah, but they don't weigh 190 pounds.
Oh yeah, fair point.
Yeah, go for it.
You cannot be moral without being religious.
I strongly disagree.
Okay.
I think people use religion as an excuse to arbitrate, to perpetuate rather sort of acts of grotesque violence against other people. That's got nothing to do with morality.
No, I agree.
I mean, ISIS. That's all like, we're doing this for the religion. What, beheading people and
putting their head on a stick,
people to death? Fine. That doesn't seem it's not very moral.
And it was the same in the Baltics when they crucified all those people. They were making forests of crucified soldiers.
In China, taking all those people who are is it Buddhists and taking them?
Muslims, yeah,
and castrating them.
The Uyghur Muslims, shaving their heads, castrating them. It's crazy. Crazy, kind of understated. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I just don't think you can rely on charity.
No, I don't either. I disagree.
It would be nice, but you need to know what you can give the people, in my opinion. Like if you've got a soldier, they're missing a leg, they need 40 grand a year. You can't hope that you're going to get 40. You need to know that you're going to get 40. Some people are naturally unlucky.
I probably agree with that. Just by statistics, there are going to be people that are luckier than others. I read a book called The Luck Factor, and it's closing view was that luck was effectively down to how much someone chose to participate in a certain thing. So the people that win the lottery more often are the ones that play it more often. But you're also going to have the outlier. So there are people who just get bad luck, but that's not because they've done anything wrong. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, it's just statistics. It's important that my child's school instills religious values. I would probably disagree, but I think what's quite something that's hidden there is that a lot of our good values do stem from religion. And I know a lot of people go, no, they're just commonsensical ones, don't steal, don't murder. But we do get a lot of those from Abrahamic religions, even though they do make sense for, a functional society. So, yeah. Okay, and the last page. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral.
I disagree with that.
Okay. Disagree. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption.
Strongly agree.
Okay. Porn depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's free will. I mean, whatever. But most people would say, well, do you want your daughter or son to be a porn star? Well, probably not. But if I had a daughter and she came to me and said, Dad, I really want to be a stripper. It's just what I want to do. I love dancing. I feel it's erotic. I feel like it's an amazing way for me to express myself. I get loads of money. Yeah. And I don't feel frightened. I don't feel scared. I don't feel like I'm being exploited. I feel like I'm the one that's in control, and it's an incredible way for me to make money.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't have a daughter, and it's probably a bit easy for me to say that in principle, but it's a bit like if my child came to me and said, if I had a son or a daughter and they said, I'm gay, I would just think, well, as long as you're happy, like that's all I care about, is that you're happy and you're safe.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to be a porn star, yeah, fine, let them get on with it. If people want to watch porn, probably not on public transport, which apparently seems to be like a worrying thing now that people are happy to watch. Yeah, a couple of people said to me they've been on buses and trains and stuff and they've seen people watching porn, which I think is a bit insensitive, but in the privacy of your own home.
Insensitive.
I don't now. I did years ago, and now I've just decided it's just not something I don't find it particularly healthy. It doesn't make me feel very good.
It's all very repeated. What's the right word? It's all very
repetitive.
Repetitive.
It's also extraordinarily odd watching two people I've never met have sex on my iPhone.
Yeah.
In the darkness of my room, it just doesn't do a lot to make my already limited self-esteem feel like it's burgeoning and growing. It's a bit like pouring battery acid on a plant. So I think for me it's a no, but for everyone else,
do what you want.
Whatever rocks your socks. Yeah.
Okay.
Rocks your socks? I don't even know what that means.
Well, anyway, that's a new one. We'll take it. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state.
I strongly agree. It's been a while for me, but when it happens, go for it.
No one can feel naturally homosexual.
I strongly disagree because I can't qualify that statement.
But we see animals, and this is not supposed to be insulting, but there are animals out there that there are some animals where it's more common, like sort of gay behaviour. But there are also some animals where even though it's like super rare, it does still happen. So if it happens in nature, I don't see how it can't be naturally.
Yeah, I think that's a ridiculous comment. I think if people are born and they feel a certain way, they feel a certain way.
I also think you wouldn't do that unless you wanted to do it. Like, we're straight.
So. Yeah.
Hairy, stinky man with floppy bits. Like, no one is going to do that unless they want to.
Yeah, agreed.
In my opinion.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat, rocks your socks, weird expressions I can come out with to say.
Yeah, think of some more. These days, openness about sex has just gone too far.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I do, actually.
It doesn't need to be so sort of ostentatious and ubiquitous. It should just be something that people... Why did I use those big words, aren't they? It doesn't need to be so public. People can be proud of who they are and what they like and what they get up to, but it doesn't need to be gratuitous because it can be offensive to other people. It's like you shouldn't be ashamed of having a wonderful sex life with a partner that's very experimental and whatever, and that's amazing. But if you're telling someone who's very religious and quite shy and a bit pious and prudish, you could make them feel really uncomfortable. So it's trying to find that middle ground where you don't feel like you're being prohibited from being honest and expressing yourself, but you're also aware of other people's sentiments and sensibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a famous saying, and I'm not even going to pretend that I know who it's from because I'll probably get the wrong person, but it's something along the lines of sex and nudity are like religion. Like everyone has it, but we don't want you to bring it out in public. So, okay, let's see where you stand.
I've got about 5 minutes, and then I need to shoot, mate.
Okay, so about
I wish I could stay for longer. But
no, it's all good.
In seeing where I am.
About the political compass test. So you've got authoritarian at the top.
Yeah.
Libertarian at the top, so free or state.
Yeah.
And then left or right. Gives us some examples.
Okay.
Your political compass test. So you are bang in the middle, left and right, which is exactly what I said.
Yeah.
And you are 2/3 of the way to freedom
liberal
than you are to statism.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that with you.
So I'm really glad, because that's a really accurate representation.
I feel like that's fair for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would imagine somebody that's woke would be sort of up here, authoritarian and left, because they're forcing it on people. And then somebody that you don't know...
Well, they're also trying to restrict freedom and thought. They're telling people what to think, how to think.
So that's why they would be towards the top with authoritarian. But you will also get people that you've known for 30 years, and then one day...
Some people who are extreme woke are like that. Not everyone that identifies as being woke, just to clarify. I don't know how many people of your viewing are woke. So
not many people. I do, but this is what I was about to say. I do have some left-wing viewers.
Right.
But they're normal people that are just like, I just feel like socialism, or not even socialism, but like, I feel like government help is needed.
Yeah, of course it is.
And da-da-da-da-da. And they would probably be somewhere in the left quadrant of the left thing. But they wouldn't be anywhere near the top for authoritarian. And I think that is the problem with woke people. That expression, woke people.
They're a lot more militant than they realise.
Exactly. It's not that they're left-wing. It's that they're left-wing and they're basically like fascist lefties. They are militant and authoritarian.
I hate to do this, but I better shoot.
No, it's all good.
Thank you for watching. I hope you didn't find that incredibly boring, but...
No worries. Yeah. Thank you, Iain. Thanks for joining us, and we will definitely do something on fitness next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish